we're going to have that inflection point hit this year. We're going to have multiple hits, and just one of those hits alone will be coming close to the daily active user base of all blockchain in existence. And that's why I'm really excited, because it's the first utility moment of Web3 really outside of payments. There's nothing else that is going to touch consumers as broadly as gaming asset ownership will.
Welcome to the Never Die Podcast, your ultimate source of crypto alpha for those who never quit. Today we have Robbie, co-founder of Immutable, on the pod. Immutable is the single biggest and most recognized crypto gaming project that there is. In this episode, we dive into everything crypto gaming. What is crypto gaming? What makes it different than maybe traditional gaming? Why you're likely underestimating just how impactful crypto gaming will be in 2024 and 2025, some really interesting insights into the IMX token and how it's used, and overall why Robbie believes crypto gaming is poised to take over gaming as we know it. Let's dive in. All right, to kick it off, really simply, as high level as you can you explain the value prop of crypto gaming? Like, what does crypto gaming actually offer over traditional gaming?
Great question. First thing I'll say is that Web3 gaming really shouldn't be thought of as a separate vertical. It might be today, but what we're building is a new horizontal for how everyone would play multiplayer games. In the same way you wouldn't say, I play free-to-play games. They are just a standard by which most people now interact with and purchase assets. We see the same thing happening for Web3 gaming. The goal is to take any game where you're spending money on in-game items, where there's multiplayer elements to that game, so an element of an economy, and to make that assets you can sell and trade later on. Now, there are all sorts of emergent new genres, properties which emerge from that. Creator-empowered UGC-based economies, third-party incentives for developers building businesses on top of platform like games companies such as Roblox or Fortnite Creative. But really this mission comes down to gamers spend $150 billion US every year, not on the ability to purchase a copy of Roblox or Skyrim and play it, but literally the skins in Fortnite, the outfits, or the coins in Candy Crush. And so our vision is pretty simple. The reason we started in the space, I've been in Bitcoin since 2014, I've been in Ethereum since 2015. I'm a software engineer by trade and a technology entrepreneur. And the reason we picked Web3 gaming is it was the first product market fit in crypto outside of payments, where we thought people don't have to speculate on what this future use case is. It's not, will 100 million people use some future DeFi application, or will the future of Forex be based on AMMs? They might be, and I'm super bullish generally around Web3 technology. However, the clearest use case right now is this demand analog. People are already spending this money on items that they don't own and they can never sell in the real world. And people want this value of being able to trade. You see this through things like RuneScape, through the real-world economies that have popped up in games since the dawn of time in World of Warcraft, in Counter-Strike Go, where $15 billion of skins are traded every year on a database controlled entirely at the behest of Valve. So that's our goal.
So just to kind of repeat it back for like the average viewer, because I know there's a lot of people that are skeptical, at least when I talk to people like ETH Denver and different places about crypto gaming. Weirdly, a huge amount of people that are skeptical on this. So I want to nail this just right off the bat. So what you're saying is the value prop for crypto gaming is this concept of like digital ownership, or the ability for players to own their in-game assets. With games today, you can't own that. You have Fortnite, you buy a skin, you might spend $1,000 on skins. You don't actually own those. Fortnite could take those away from you at any moment they want. Those items are not transferable. You can't resell those items, and so they can't accrue value. And really, what crypto gaming, like at its core base, like value prop, is it unlocks the ability for users and players to own their in-game assets and be able to actually go sell those on the secondary market. And it's not about those assets maybe necessarily having really high values or anything like that. It's just about, now as a player, you truly own these assets. And the more time that people maybe spend in these digital economies, the more it makes sense that we should have some form of digital ownership.
That's exactly right. And I would say, just like gaming is whale-driven in monetization, we expect Web3 gaming to be whale-driven in monetization. But now those whales spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, they can actually get value for what they're putting into the game. They can become an owner of large portions of the creation of game assets or of future game utility. They can influence the game's future. So really, gaming comes down to whales in terms of monetization, and this is also a far better value proposition to them.
I think anyone who's familiar with crypto gaming is probably most familiar with the games we saw back in 2021. Which I think most people would say that the games we saw in 2021, not all of them, but for the most part, were pretty lackluster, right? Like, and so when I talk to people about crypto gaming, they're like, I've seen that. Maybe they got into some weird Ponzi like crypto game, and they're like, it wasn't that fun, or like crypto games aren't really that good. Should we expect to see more games like that, in 2024, 2025? Or what kind of games are coming out in this maybe second wave of crypto games?
We will always see games that attempt to, I think, be lower on the quality side in order to, farm the hype of Web3. That's just the reality of capital markets and tokens in Web3. What we will see is games that have been now had 2 to 4 years of time invested into it, had anywhere between, millions to tens to hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. And I mean, for context, COD Warzone 2 with hundreds of millions of players had a budget of around 150 to $200 million. So these are real budgets in terms of game development, which typically are sort of 10 to 50% of the cost of building a high quality movie. And the real difference, and I think the reason everyone said, this was a fad back in 21 is the time it takes to build good games is so much longer than the time it takes to build DeFi. Andre Cronje can ship something in production in 6 weeks. It takes a very long time to build games. And the vast majority of people building back then weren't Web2 developers deciding to build in Web3. They were Web3 natives saying we should build a game from scratch. And some of those people will get there in the end, but they certainly won't get there on known timelines. They certainly haven't necessarily done this a million times before. The difference about this cycle is we literally have developers like Ubisoft launching games. We have, I think, over half of our portfolio from teams who have shipped games with, million daily active player hits or not. And that's because we select for that in terms of the games we're prioritizing. It's one of the highest indicators of success, but it's also this Web3 gaming market was an incredible funding market for gaming entrepreneurs. And a lot of them shifted over and said, we're really excited about, building the future here. The amount of gaming CEOs I speak to from either public gaming companies or the top 20 gaming companies in the world who say, hey, I'm personally extremely excited. There's a group of small people who are extremely excited. We just need to see this model work at scale. It's too risky at a board level right now. I would say it's roughly 60 to 70%. There's tremendous interest. What it needs is the same inflection moment that every other shift in distribution has had. For mobile gaming, it was, the first hit mobile games, some of them made by, Supercell, which opened up this whole genre of what a successful mobile-driven games look like. For gacha games, I think it was Dragon Online out of Japan, which was the first gacha game ever made. For social games, it was Farmville and Mafia Wars. As soon as someone got the model right and got, a critical mass of players, everyone could copy that model really successfully, and there was much less risk in adopting that distribution method. We're going to have that inflection point hit this year. We're going to have multiple hits, and just one of those hits alone will be coming close to the daily active user base of all blockchain in existence. And that's why I'm really excited, because it's the first utility moment of Web3 really outside of payments. There's nothing else that is going to touch consumers as broadly as gaming asset ownership will.
Okay. So what you're saying is the games we saw back in 2021 were like this first batch of like just hobbled together games because people saw that there was some sort of use case here, and they said, okay, we want to be first to market, we want to make a lot of money or whatever. They threw together a game that was like quickly rushed together. And yeah, some of these were huge hits. Like Axie at its height was like billions, I think. It was massive. It wasn't like not a very complicated, maybe necessarily really fun game. But players were hooked on it because of this maybe crypto aspect or this ownership aspect. And you're saying that since then, we've had years of development, and just like a ton of Web 2 teams have actually come in who are actually game builders, and they're building games using these same functions, but these are like leagues above because they've actually taken the time to build real games, and those are about to hit the market. Did you say this year and next year?
We track over 80 games on Immutable's platform alone going live before the end of this year.
Wow. Okay.
And those are all, that's not even including the long tail, right? The minimum funding one of those games has is 7 figures. These are all high quality teams building, things that could be credible hits.
Have you seen crypto as like a really good funding mechanism for these games? Because I gotta imagine maybe is it a way to like kind of maybe get around the traditional funding methods of a game?
So I think there's 3 main things crypto today is delivering to game developers that are really exciting. One is the promise of ownership opens up a much higher user spend. The question I always ask is how much would you pay for a house if you could never sell the house? You would pay some inherent utility value, maybe some, like forward cash flows of rent from which ownership values can be derived, but it's not going to be the same level at which people trade and sell things today. And we're seeing that in gaming, right? In Gods Unchained, it's 10 times the average industry ARPU of trading card games. In Illuvium, they've made $150 million in revenue over the last 2 years. I mean, that's high even for Pokemon, for a Nintendo-based game. Now you have these comparables of Pal World coming out and other games like Pixelmon, which I think are completely poised to take this narrative. The second thing, and the thing I'm really excited about, is creator royalties and creator monetization. And this is a big distribution shift, right? We're actually seeing 2 things happen. One is the rise of creators as a form of influence and distribution, as opposed to, one single publisher or entity. And this is not just in gaming, this is everywhere. Second is the power of user-generated content. And third is the commoditization of generation of content. So making assets, making clips is becoming cheaper than ever because of AI. Right now, I can create an image. Soon, I might be able to create a Roblox map pretty much overnight, even if I'm not technical with AI. At that point, the value really comes to who can create the best system that rewards incentives for creating the most interesting sets of worlds, use cases, applications, and demand. And that's clearly Web3. There's no other model where you can create an asset. That asset can be traded anywhere in the world, which we can do with Immutable's global order book. And you can get royalties from those assets no matter where they trade, which you can do with Immutable enforceable royalties. We're the only protocol that enforces in the world. This is a killer value prop for games. If you have a look at Roblox, if you have a look at Minecraft, if you have a look at Fortnite, Creative, which they've just pivoted into, all the greatest gaming successes of the last 10 years have been platform plays. And the success of platform plays relies on how successful can you make creator monetization. And Web3 is the most powerful creator monetization tool ever invented. The third thing is fundable tokens, so ERC20s. And right now, this is a fantastic capital asset, so a great way for games to fundraise. The number of deals we've seen in Web3 gaming has 20x'd in 4 months. So deals that would almost not get done are now getting done in a week at early stage valuations. But the really exciting thing is, how can you use that in a way that is profitable for the ecosystem and to the game, in a way that is ROAS positive, return on ad spend positive effectively if you think about token outlay as a spend, and use that as your UA budget. And I'm really excited about this because one of the biggest problems for games is performance marketing and competition is terrible. You spend $1 billion if you're the biggest game in the world on Facebook ads, on Google ads. Facebook and Google take a 30% cut each, and none of that value goes to the players. Why not create a model where you share future upside, future utility in that game? Every single person who plays that game can earn a piece of that, and they earn extra pieces by sharing it with friends who spend. Now, there's details to that. How do you make it underwritten? How do you not just get it botted? But, this is something we're experimenting with our games. A lot of our platform games are experimenting. The pitch is very simple. Remove the middleman entirely and just share value with games to have your UA budget be the token and effectively this future utility in the game itself.
You brought up a lot of good points. One of it was I've actually talked to somebody about crypto gaming, and their biggest pushback was like, well, why would a gaming studio give up that profit and that ability to control those items? Like, what are they going to get in return? And you pointed out that, like, for one, people are going to spend more on these assets. Like, if people could make money off the Fortnite store, they'd probably be buying a lot more, thinking that maybe this collectible in the future could be worth more. And then the second thing is, I don't think you mentioned this, but this concept. Oh no, you did. Royalties, but also royalties for the game. So
exactly
with assets. the game can make perpetual royalties off the volume of those items sold. So like when a player buys, say X item, it's a skin for like $10, and it's maybe one of the first skins, and later down the line, because it's so rare, that skin sells for like $1,000. Well, they're going to make royalties off of each time that skin sold, and so it becomes this sort of perpetual revenue stream for them, where they're not even having to really sell these skins themselves. They're making money off of the volume of them being sold in the secondary market as well. And then you mentioned another thing about 150 million from Illuvium in the past 2 years, and you said that was greater than Pokemon.
It's in the numbers that these companies care about at scale. Like, these are real scaled numbers of revenue.
Dang, that's crazy. What about geographically? So when you're looking at these games, is there like different? I kind of know there is markets different geographically. I know like Asia's market's like very different than like the U.S. market. How are you seeing that maybe pieced together? Are different games being developed for different markets, or?
I just want to add one more thing into what you said, which is all of those things we just talked about, which is ARPU, which is creator monetization, which is UA budget. None of those are new. They're all just 10x improvements in the current system. If you have a look at royalties, there are companies monetizing off these, because you have Steam taking 30% on every single trade on their platform, and Counter-Strike Go trades $15 billion every year. And then Valve trade locked assets at the start of 2018, so you could only trade them once per week. They deprecated third-party marketplaces, so businesses like Opskins went belly up. All we're building is a future where you don't pay anywhere near that fee. The fees go to people creating value, and the models are guaranteed, and anyone can build a business on it. We see typically, if you have a spot market, the size of derivatives and secondary financial markets on top of that is an order of magnitude larger. We have $150 billion in gaming every year. That could easily become $1 trillion market if you look at futures, options, index funds, if we can open that up and give people financial empowerment. And the other idea, I guess, of creator monetization, this is the key thing that we see creator platforms fighting over. You have Roblox paying out, more than most typical platforms, but it's still a tiny fraction of what they could do if they could take secondary royalties and they could keep the majority of the primary sale monetization too. And the thing I'm excited about is none of these players necessarily lose. Imagine if you're the App Store or the Play Store, and now instead of just worrying about how do you retain and enforce value at that primary sale position, you could say, well, actually, we want to let secondary markets thrive, and we can take an ongoing royalty on secondary markets. The business models aren't antithetical to successful companies. They're just more aligned with the end user. Now, Jesse, your question was geographic split. And we actually see a reasonably large geographic split at the moment, mainly in the cultural attitudes towards Web3 gaming and the approaches taken by the companies. In the West, I think we have obviously a tougher market culturally. You have to be really cautious in the way you do these products. That's why, we've built this technology so you don't even know you're using Web3 under the hood. But of course, NFTs in some circles is a bad word. It has a huge branding problem, which I think is actually fine, because no one should be telling you to buy NFTs in the same way that no one should be telling you to use HTTPS and know what that means when you go to a website. You don't have to know it's a hypertext transfer protocol and it's secure and no one can read your messages. You just know that when you submit your credit card, it's safe. In the same way, we're going to be building a brand with Web3 gaming where you just know, if I buy this asset, I can sell it later on and no one can rug me. That's really the core promise of digital asset ownership. If you're a creator, you get fees, no one can rug me. And I think in the West, the first successful games will be ones pivoting around either A, MMOs with incredibly detailed, intricate economies, where think of almost the RuneScape demographic, or B, really this creator and skin trading based economies, things like Counter-Strike Go, but in Web3, I think will be very successful. In Asia, I think it's a totally different game. Almost all options are available from day one because the players in Asia are very used to paying for power. There's no Web3 gaming brand problem at all. No one minds NFTs. And so we have games that are almost from day one, hey, you can pay for power, you can have crazy economies and crazy design schemes. So I'd say the audience reception between those two is very different, and I expect the first massive hits to actually come out of Asia.
How big's the difference between how big's the gaming audience in the US versus the gaming audience in Asia?
Well, if you take Asia as a whole, it's larger than the US, but the US is the largest single country. Not by per player spend, but by overall spend. The highest per player spend in the world is Japan.
How big do you think something like crypto gaming could get? Like, do you see it overall long term being like maybe more of a niche where these kind of obscure crypto players are like, hey, we do this crypto gaming thing, or do you see it as something that like really impacts the overall gaming market and becomes a mainstream kind of major thing in the gaming space?
I'm a little biased because I am just incredibly, obviously biased. But my beliefs on digital asset ownership is almost every form of unique value will one day be traded as an NFT. And I think that doesn't actually come down to digital ownership. It comes down to better liquidity and better financial utility. And markets have always moved to where prices are better or you can get better financial services. That is an immutable law of how the last century of financial progress has operated. And ultimately, if you have open smart contracts where anyone can clone and fork modular components of finance, and the fees on which this built will eventually get brought down to, I guess, the lowest fees that will be tolerable in an equilibrium where anyone can sushi swap or sort of create incentives to create new network effects. I think you have a far more efficient financial system overall, where the average fees on all sorts of financial services will be lower. But most importantly, and this is really what a lot of Web3 comes down to in terms of its value, is standardization and trust. International shipping did not take off until they standardized the international shipping container. And this took a ridiculously long time. It's one of the greatest examples of, I guess, the slowness of but eventual success of international collaboration ever is to literally have shipping containers that they would stack. So that you could take any container from one country and you could stack 12 of them on top of each other, and then ultimately thousands on ships, which is what we do today. And all of that is what creates the economies of scale for getting goods around the world. The same thing is about to happen for everything on a digital and infinite scale with the standards of Web3. Web3 is the first time we've ever really been able to get people on a trading perspective to agree to the same API endpoints, to the same standards of asset definition, to the same royalty standards, all because of the open and composability of smart contracts. We now have the ability to create markets for everything. But most things aren't currencies, they're non-fungible. There's 100 times more dollars worth of non-fungible stuff in the world than there is of fungible stuff. You have close to 400 trillion US dollars worth of homes in the world today. You have trillions of dollars in centralized finance, in instruments that ultimately are unique, for example, a term deposit. All of this, you'll have better pricing and you'll have better financial utility for every business, every individual, if it's on Web3. That's my conviction over the next 10 to 20 years. So I guess when people ask about, will gaming assets, I'm like, of course, this is the prototype. This is the most obvious scenario. They're digital-only goods. People are already paying for them. And ultimately, I think it's almost this mirage that we've been sold because something's intangible, because something's on the internet. You shouldn't have digital property rights over it. I mean, people have been arguing over this stuff since the dawn of time, and it's always been on the side of the underdog. And now because there's this branding problem, some people are, saying the other way. But really, if you have a look at DRM, if you have a look at the history of should I own my music or rent my music, this argument has been here from ever since we first created servers and first created the idea of a database where you could have access to some utility but not necessarily be able to trade the title ownership of that utility. And I think the time is to reset property rights. The default is when you buy a good on the internet, if it's digital, you actually own that good.
You mentioned something about composable games. And it made me think, do you see a world where, say, let's use Illuvium as an example. Illuvium has all these alluvials, right? Do you see a world where another indie startup says, hey, we're creating a game, you can take your alluvials from Illuvium and actually use those assets in our game? How would that work with IP rights, or how do you imagine that maybe playing out? Because I can imagine for the indie studio, that's a great kind of little vampire attack for them to be like, oh, cool, you've spent thousands of dollars on these assets, come use them in our game. We bring more utility to them, and the players are going to be like, that's great, we love that. But I don't know if maybe Illuvium would like that as much. How do you see that playing out?
It's a great question. I think about this in a few ways. First, people talk about interoperability being the killer value prop of Web3 gaming. It's not. I mean, there's no real meaningful use case of interoperability today. And what you've pointed out was user acquisition. I think that'll be the killer value prop of interoperability. And the other one will be basically platforms built on top of interoperability by design, which will be like Roblox is the world where you have that as a key characteristic. But this idea of like, I don't know, a metaverse where you can use the same assets everywhere doesn't make sense because the economics don't make sense. Whoever is creating the environment in which you provide utility to a digital asset, why would they let someone else's asset, primary demand, have value accrued to it because of the world they've built? They might, but those incentives aren't obviously clear from day one. So like, here's the use cases I think of. Number one is exactly what you said, which is vampire attacks. I think we'll see really interesting, fun versions of user acquisition. I mean, the more corporate-friendly version of that is you can just help game studios who struggle to shift audiences from one game to the next, and that is a big problem. If you look at Supercell, they've had some of the biggest hits in the world, Clash Royale, Clash of Clans. They've also had some big failures, and one of their struggles is, I mean, obviously retention, but getting a critical mass of players from previous games to a new one. They have to spend $1 billion again on ads. You know, they can't instantly transfer that audience over. Imagine you could, though, say, hey, if you were a Clash Royale whale, a Clash of Clans whale, you have all this cool value and you're going to be one of the first, owners of this world in this new game, whatever their new mobile game is. And of course, that's an economic decision. Will this cannibalize the sales in this game less than it will reduce user acquisition costs? As soon as that's true, you should do that, is the model for that. The other thing I think we'll see is maybe alliance models, where almost like an airline alliance, you sign up for one and you can get points on 8 or so when they're aggregating demand and aggregating loyalty. I think we might see this with a set of games where they decide to almost build an alliance. They can reduce user acquisition costs and build brand loyalty with a set of games. The most interesting model, though, is how do you build business models which fundamentally rely on interoperability? And the answer there is you build a creator platform where the assets that creators are designing or the mods that they're designing, they're able to earn value from, and then they can almost be used everywhere in the experience. So I don't know, imagine on Roblox, every time you create a skin, that can be used in every world or like an NPC algorithm. And every time it's used, you're earning royalties or some sort of a fee. I think that's the sort of real bull case for something fully designed around interoperability.
Or something like, obviously, like Fortnite, imagine it was a big Web3 game. And then, like, it always has skins from, like, Marvel, Disney, etc. But imagine those were other games, and it's like, hey, we're going to port in your skin. And I think the benefit to maybe that game would be, hey, you're going to get a lot more volume on this skin. Like, a lot more people are going to buy and sell it because they can go use it in this really popular game. There's a lot of interesting business models that could kind of pop up. I was going to ask you, do you think that, like, for Web3 games or crypto games, are gamers going to have to, like, understand crypto to use these games? Or is that going to be just completely abstracted away? And as a gamer, you won't even really necessarily know, except you have this cool benefit of, like, owning your assets.
Yeah, look, I think they shouldn't have to understand what crypto is, the game is crypto, in order to use it. I think there'll be points where they can, if they decide to have more than $1,000 worth of assets, they're probably going to interrogate where they stored, etc., under the hood. And I think that's really important, that they can always know the custody of their assets, the level of centralization. But ultimately, I think the way we get to mainstream adoption is 1 million, 10 million, 100 million people playing a Web3 game with a thriving economy, and under the hood, the user experience is seamless. And I think over time, there'll be brands built around what types of assets they're using, and they'll know at some level, this is on-chain or this is Web3. But I think the user experience in the UI will have zero friction for a first-time user to be converted into that. It's almost, a one-way door where they accidentally become crypto pilled without knowing it.
I want to kind of transition a little bit more into an immutable focus. And I have a couple questions to get through, so we'll try to make these quick. But how many games total has Immutable signed?
Now over 280. I think last week was one of our biggest weeks today. It was 20 games, which is pretty insane.
Wow, that's a lot of games. 280. How many of those are going live in 2024, 2025 that you know of?
Almost all by 2025. Well, that's the timelines they've committed to. Because we beyond that, we don't care about winning them. They're not going to do much to contribute to the flywheel to help build this critical mass of players, unless they're literally one of the top 10 named accounts in the world. And then we'd be happy to go on that journey, and we have. But the majority next 12 months.
Can you give me like a really brief overview of like what is Immutable, what are your different products, and what do you guys do? Like how would you describe it?
Absolutely. Immutable is the one-stop shop platform to help developers build a successful Web3 game. And we offer everything from a easy way to build all of your smart contracts. You can drag and drop them from Ethereum with Immutable ZK EVM, or you can build directly with APIs, which I think is extremely important as the mainstream curve of developer adoption hits off. The only reason Stripe was able to attain success is they made their platform incredibly easy to use for anyone with a standard set of APIs. We think we need to do the same thing to abstract away a lot of smart contract development. People can't be asked to engage with proprietary coding languages, with concepts of re-entrancy bugs or security paradigms that only exist in Web3. We have to make this simple. We offer a whole suite of consumer products to make the onboarding incredibly easy. So one is Immutable Passport, which is our wallet. It is a smart contract wallet with full self-custody where you can use the same funds on any game, so not signing it unlike most other wallets. And you can literally sign on with email, iOS, Android. So it's the fastest signing experience for any wallet in the world. We A/B tested it with competitors, and it tests currently 500% better than the main custodial competitors. And you also have invisible signing. So if you're inside the game and you're receiving, say, an asset, or you're fusing two swords into a mega sword, you can do that without ever having to alt-tab or switch out of the gaming experience, which is incredibly important. We built infrastructure for marketplaces. So we have a product called the Immutable Global Order Book, which means if you sell an asset on any Immutable marketplace, it shows up everywhere else. And the reason this is so important is it means we're preventing liquidity fragmentation, which is one of our core product strategies. It's one of the killer Achilles heels of NFTs and crypto more broadly. So let's say you're in Fortnite, you own a John Wick skin, you want to sell it, you probably want to sell it then and there. You don't want to alt tab to a different marketplace. But if you're a whale and you're buying these assets, you probably want to use, a Beam or a Token Trove or a Magic Eden or any third-party marketplace. And you can do that, and you can buy the listings now that would otherwise be inaccessible. And every one of those marketplaces can take fees, and the creator of that asset or the game can take royalties. It's the product I'm most proud of that we build over here. And we have several other sources of liquidity aggregation, which is cross-rollup liquidity, and which is the liquidity from Passport, not siloing deposits to each game. We have the Mutable checkout, which means any user can pay in any set of funds. They can pay with credit card, they can pay with L1 values, they can pay with L2 values. Our goal is literally anything that is stopping Web3 games from being successful, we'll either build or partner so that as a game, you only have one choice. And of course, we have all sorts of marketing and publishing services because on the Immutable Studios side, we actually build and publish games ourselves. And this is the number one thing I think we've done to be successful. I mean, we started by building the first ever multiplayer game on the blockchain, Etherbots. We then scaled that into Gods Unchained. Without those experiences, and without the experiences of the 4 games we're publishing today, which is Guild of Guardians, Metalcore, Infinite Victory, and Shardbound, we would not know how the Apple Store policy actually works, how it actually means to build a sustainable economy, what the user experience was required for Passport, why we even need a global order book. It's only because we're at the coalface of solving our customers' problems, because we are them, that we're able to build such a successful platform. And honestly, that's the reason why we've been able to build this market share, even without the funding that we got a few years ago, and we've obviously now had one of the largest war chests in the space. But before then, the reason we were still able to compete with the largest blockchains in the world is where we're 100% focused on gaming. Our product's 100% focused on gaming, and we deeply understand their needs. And I think that you can throw as much money as you want at that problem, unless that's in your company's DNA. It's a very difficult one to solve.
I didn't even know you guys built your own games. Like, that's awesome. Okay, so I have some questions around your guys' tokenomics that I really want to dive into that confuse me. I think I understand them, but I want to kind of check with you. So right now, you guys have about 70% of your tokens unlocked. But the vast majority of those tokens are either held in the Ecosystem Development Fund, the Foundational Reserve, or the Project Development Fund, which that accounts for, I think, about total of 80% of the total supply, if I understand it correctly. And so it seems like it's important to note, how do those tokens end up coming back into circulation, since essentially 80% of the supply is held for all of these different incentives or development sort of funding needs?
So the most important thing is, so we work with the Digital World Foundation, which issued the token. And unlike the majority of other blockchains or foundations in the world who, when they give a grant, they basically give it out, say, come on board and just sell the grant. It's basically funding. Every single recommendation we make to the foundation around grants is underwritten, which basically means in order for the game to receive those grants, they have to drive volume to the protocol. And this works fantastic for both parties because, one, it means that we're aligning incentives, and when they win, we win. But two, it means that the value of the supply is protected because it's not given out to any random project. There's not some huge supply increase because we've done these enormous deals. It's every single thing has to be essentially paid for via the volume they contribute to the protocol. So most of these are set up as you get tranche one after contributing a certain amount of GMV to the protocol. Because the token has utility, every 20% of every transaction must be paid for in IMX. You can see the clear utility based on each one of these milestones. The foundation is so efficient at this that I think there's 200 million tokens out of that 1 billion pile of ecosystem grants that have been allocated over the last 2 years. In order for those to be earned, $14 billion in protocol volume has to be attained by those games.
Wow.
Which means $300 million in protocol fees, which makes us the fourth highest grossing protocol in the space after Ethereum.
That's really unique. Not a lot of people not a lot of projects are like that. They throw money. They throw money like they're throwing a party. It's just like all over the place. Everyone gets some, and hopefully it works out. But wow, that's amazing. You guys do it that way. So is there like a vesting period? So like when say you give it as like an incentive to fund a game, or I don't know, however you use it, is there like a vesting period on it? Like they have to earn it, but also is there like once they earn it,
there generally is as well. Oh. Yeah, I mean I'm talking in generalities here, but yes.
Okay, so in some ways, it's almost safe to say, because like on CoinMarketCap, different things like that, it shows your guys' total in supply circulation. With 80% of those held by you guys for incentives, those aren't, I mean, like it's almost fair to say that like on the open market liquid, there's closer to that'd be about 950 million that's actually liquid on the open market being traded. The rest is held for incentives and grants and different things like that.
I couldn't speak the exact numbers, but certainly our philosophy is, value should be released when people are creating value for the protocol and for everyone. And the reason games love it is, A, they're optimistic about their success, what they can achieve, it drives them to succeed. But B, it knows that they're not going to get rugged by some, giant grant dumping on the market. And I think that's incredibly important. And obviously the supply schedules is a very hot topic right now for most major protocols.
That's amazing. And that's really exciting and really good news. What are you most excited about going forward with Mutable?
Look, the sheer number of games. I mean, we've been building, the team has been such a huge effort over the last 9 months building Immutable CKVM. Literally every engineer was working over Christmas in these teams, which I don't say to be, I'm not trying to valorize that, but it's what needed to be done. And they've just done an incredible effort bringing this to in production today in early access. We now have the final infrastructure needed to onboard people seamlessly. The chain is there. We've literally built full gas sponsorship. So if you're a game, you can pay for all the gas on behalf of your users. They can sign up with email. They never even need to know they're touching Web3. And I'm not saying this. You can, if you're watching this, download Gods Unchained and play with Mobile or any one of our games and experience this value prop for yourself. And the number of games going live, even by July, is going to be huge. And obviously, if you've been following our socials, you've probably seen the main quest has just begun. So if you want to join the journey, I suggest you stay tuned.
Well, this is my last question. Where do you see crypto gaming in like 5 years from now?
I think 5 years from now, we will have meaningful penetration into mainstream economies. And there will be, really, this is all going to be driven by even as we have hits, it's all power law driven. So as one game becomes successful, it's going to spur many, many more Web 2 giants to adopt it. And then the most successful of that bunch will make this look like a footnote. So really, I think the best case scenario for 5 years' time is we have a few Fortnites, like a few, $10 billion games essentially built leveraging Web 3 technology, in which the stories you'll see are creator makes $10 million because of the superior economic rights of this system, or $1 billion paid to creators, orders of magnitude more than other platforms. I think those are the stories that are going to fundamentally transform the brand of Web3 gaming and pretty much get everyone on board with it. But I think the other thing is, at that point, it will be too big to ignore, and gamers will start to demand property rights for games where they really trading as a core. And that's the innovator's dilemma. That's really the way we shift power into the incumbents actually changing their policies, is if gamers are like, this is not good enough, I now demand this level of property rights and standards for my digital goods. And I think hopefully at that point we've habituated enough people that that's the expectation rather than the abnormality.
Well, Robbie, it was really great having you on. I don't think this episode could have gone better. I was already pretty excited about Immutable and what you guys were doing, but this just all gets me more excited about what you guys are doing. And it feels like I've done a lot of research into Immutable, and there's things that I'd even missed about what you guys are doing. And it sounds like you guys are doing a lot, and you guys are doing it really, really well, and just kind of next level, especially for the crypto space. And I'm really excited to see where you guys go in the next 5 to 10 years.
Look, I think it's going to be really fun. I think it's a really important mission. And I think this is going to be the year probably for Web3 gaming.
Well, as always, none of this was investment advice. You should always do your own research. Crypto is risky, and you got to act like an adult and own your decisions. And remember, winners never quit. The path is always forward, and crypto never dies.